So we are on the third week of our fall book study. We're studying the book by Richard Rohr called Everything Belongs. If you have not gotten this book, it is worth getting. It will nourish you. It will awaken you. It may challenge you. It will be interesting for sure. It's not a light read. And you don't have to have the book in order to participate in our series, but I highly recommend it. Richard Rohr leads a contemplative center out west. He is a teacher of mindfulness, of contemplation, of practicing the presence in the present moment. He is a Franciscan, and he is someone who today on this planet is bringing people together, is helping people see through their kind of myopic lens of their own religion and getting to reach the place where all religions or spiritual practices touch. And I don't say that on behalf of him because I doubt he would say he's an interfaith person in any way. But he teaches the power of the present moment in a way that brings East and West together. And he teaches Christianity in a way that brings new thought and traditional Christianity and expanded Christianity together. And we can tell by what's going on in the world today that this is one of the most critical practices in our world right now, right? I know that what's going on in the world is probably heavy on everyone's hearts, and I appreciate that we're doing our work to wake up here and to hold sacred space for humanity, remembering that God is one and that we are one in that God. Amen? So, last week, we had an invitation from Richard Rohr to be challenged by our Christ, saying if our Christ is not challenging us to grow, to expand ourselves, to expand our ideas, to expand our inclusion, to break through our boxes that we put God in, then we have an invitation, we have an opportunity for growth that is magnificent. Has anyone that has been practicing with the book or reading the book been challenged at all? Good. You're here to be uncomfortable. We don't come here to be comfortable. You know, if you go see a therapist, some people go see therapists sometimes and you tell the therapist all about your life and the therapist can validate you're doing a great job and you're on the right track and everyone is your enemy, right? Is that useful? Or you can go to a therapist and you could say, here's the stuff that I know about, here's what other people are saying, or the effects that are happening in my life, the things that seem crunchy, here's the things I understand about it. Can you help me see what else might be there that I'm not working on or I'm not getting or I'm not seeing? See the difference? I think that's what the living God does for us all the time. When we're invited into unity consciousness, we're invited into unity, we have the opportunity to see things that seem like separation, to see things that feel wrong or that we can criticize so that we can have that experience of awakening and enlightenment, that we can have that experience of all godness, of love. Now, this section is full. And it's also about, guess what? Nothingness and emptiness. So it's incredibly full, and it's about nothingness and emptiness. So are you ready? There was a quote that came by me this week that said, "The magic you are looking for is in the work you are avoiding." The magic you are looking for is in the work you are avoiding. So if there's anything that you have wanted to avoid about the spiritual conversations we have, about the book, about what's triggering or what's awakening in it, about something that's going on in you and your life or in our world, let's open to the magic there. Let's open to the possibility that that's exactly where we're called to look. So he starts this chapter with a poetic, beautiful Zen teaching, Zen master to his disciples. Is there anything that I can do to make myself enlightened? As little as you can do to make the sun rise in the morning. Then of what use are the spiritual exercises you prescribe? To make sure you are not asleep when the sun begins to rise. To make sure you are not asleep when the sun begins to rise. Richard Rohr talks about the contemplative secret. He says the contemplative secret is to learn to live in the now. The now is not as empty as it might appear to be or that we fear it may be. Try to realize that everything is right here, right now. Do you believe that everything is right here, right now? We don't always feel it, but in unity we teach that. Like God has already given everything God has to give right here and right now. It's in our lens, it's in our view, it's in our moment of awakening, it's in our yes that we get it. That our awakening is available to us right here, right now. Regardless of if we're standing on a mountaintop, if we're sitting with a crying baby, if we're in a sanctuary, if we're in a mosque, wherever we are, God is. Wherever we are, the present moment is the portal to our awakening. He says, because our moments are not tasted or full or real in the presence, we are never full. We create artificial fullness and try to hang on to that. But there's nothing to hold on to when we begin to taste the fullness of the now. God is either in this now or God isn't at all. God is either in this now or God isn't at all. How would that be to try on for an affirmation to walk around with? You know, to really bring to ourselves from day to day, from moment to moment, when we're experiencing life, God is either in this now or not at all. And breathe into that. Say, let me awaken to that truth. To let that prayer have its way within our being and to have that conversation that opens the flow of life that is continually happening so that we can feel it, we can experience it, so that it becomes real. To trust that that is a truth. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, started the individuals he was working with and supporting, started with himself first, with affirmations. And some people misunderstand affirmations and denials. Some people think that an affirmation, you could say something that's totally not true, like, I'm the best basketball player in the world. I should have used football. That's not what an affirmation is. An affirmation isn't just throwing something out there that is kind of an airy-fairy idea. It's taking a statement of truth that you might not believe, that either your body is not expressing it, your mind is not embracing it, your beliefs are not living from it, but it is a statement of truth. It is deep spiritual truth. So that truth that God is right here, right now. In Unity, we believe in one presence, one power, God, the good omnipotence. It's all-knowingness, it's all power, and it's everywhere present and inexhaustible. Now, when we look out at the world and we look at war, we look at separation, sometimes when we look at our own lives or feel in our own beings, it does not feel like that. But the truth is, the spiritual truth behind that is that that is a misperception. That is a missing the mark. Richard Rohr talks about the idea of individualism almost as if it's a sickness. That when we individuated in culture, it was an era of getting to know ourselves and learn ourselves, and that's been beautiful. But when we make that our God, we misunderstand what we truly are. Because together, in our togetherness, we are the body of Christ. In our togetherness, we are the body of God. Call it by any name you want to. The body of love is probably the most comfortable way to say it for everyone in this room. I love doing weddings. When I do weddings, I say, what's your name for God? And some people say, well, I don't believe in God. I said, do you believe in love? Absolutely. Well, God is love. God doesn't care what you call God. Why would God care what you call God? So we are the body of love. When we separate from that body of love, when we pull ourselves apart, when we criticize, when we tear it up, we feel like we don't belong. We feel separate. And how much space and time on this planet do we spend telling ourselves and telling each other that we don't belong? In whatever way, shape, or form. That's exactly what's going on in the Middle East right now. You don't belong. We all belong right where we are on this planet, right where we are in our being, right where we are with each other. Because we are of one body, of one mind, the divine mind, all expressions of it. But we're also human, and so we're part of the human condition. And that can become easier to presence and easier to understand when we just simply look at the mind and what the mind does. The little loop we get ourselves into is forgetting that the mind and our humanity is here to also bring about our holiness, our divinity. So we sometimes get caught in the things of the mind. What does the mind do? How do we know we're kind of in the mind rather than in the presence? Well, it tries to control, doesn't it? Control, control, control. I must control. I must control you. I must control them. I must control the present moment. I must control myself. I must control the circumstances. The separate sense of self, the ego, mind, whatever you want to call it. In traditional Christianity, sometimes we call it the devil. Control, power, domination. What else is part of that pattern? Comparison. Saying something's higher, something's lower, something's better, something's less. Something's superior, something's inferior. Something's good, something's bad. Something's us, something's them. It takes a spiritual mind and spiritual maturity to have the space for conflicting and opposing ideas and thoughts and make them okay. Ever entered into an argument with someone that you know you are right and they are so wrong? It is very difficult to hold two opposing views without attacking one. But Charles Fillmore calls love the great harmonizer. The great harmonizer. Why? Because love is a healer. Love does not need to defend itself. Love does not need to be right. Love is simply practicing the presence. It's bringing our divinity to a moment rather than solidifying our separation and our humanity. Competition. To be right. To be first. To be the best. When we're in that state of mind, it's human, it's ordinary. But again, we're not here to be ordinary. We're here to be extraordinary. We're here to be expressions of the presence. We're here not just to affirm that God is love, but to be an experience of God as love. Now, how many of us have challenges with that? Like every day? Like every second in this mind that's a battlefield. So what do we do? How do we use the practice to bring ourselves into transformation? I think one of the first steps is to have radical self-acceptance and self-compassion. Because we are going to fail, right? We're going to try and wake up, and then we're going to have an opportunity, and we're going to fall down. And that's okay. And you know what? The people around us and the circumstances of the world, the situations of the world, guess what? They're going to show up. We're going to expect them to thrill us, and they're going to disappoint us over and over again. It's going to feel like not enough. And that's just the human condition. Practicing the presence is what brings about the spiritual condition. That's what heals, that's what makes whole, that's what reveals true vision. That's the only thing that births through the human condition for God to show itself to its creation. Richard Rohr says the calculating mind is opposite of the contemplative mind. The mind that he invites us into is the contemplative mind. And he says, be careful, as the master teacher Jesus the Christ said, you will be disturbed. You will be disturbed. So often we think it's everything out here that's the ain't it awful. Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? But the master teacher did a lot of work inviting us into a deeper practice of it's not just what I say out here, it's what's going on inside. The symbolism of the adulterer and adultery. It's not just what I do, it's not just my actions, it actually goes back into what's happening in my mind. How safe are people on the streets of your mind? Reverend Sally Taylor, who's in her Freedom Forum, she used to say that in her talks. How safe are people on the streets of your mind? Have we listened to the mind? Do we know it? Because that's the spiritual invitation. The spiritual invitation is to become so familiar with the control, the comparison, the competition, the defending, the calculating, all the pieces of the mind that are part of our humanity, so that we can presence them and make way for our divinity. Richard Rohr talked about the greatest spiritual teachers, saying the greatest spiritual teachers were not ones that had a lot of power or expressed dominance, that expressed themselves and said, give me the power, I will overpower you. They're ones that saw authentically and beautifully, saw humanity and saw straight through it to God. Straight through it to God. Like, I will not be distracted by the things of the world, by the things of the ego. I know all godness is right here, and I will speak it, I will see it, and I will call it forth. One of my favorite quotes from this chapter. We can relate to God only according to the level of our human development and the level at which we relate to everyone else. Is that good news? Is that bad news? We can relate to God only according to the level of our human development and the level at which we relate to everyone else. If you have struggled with holding opposing views, If you have struggled even with yourself when it comes to the control mind, the comparison mind, the competition mind, congratulations. If you have struggled in picking a side, congratulations. God is love, and we are emanations of this love. But as Richard Rohr tells us, when we look into the mind and we recognize what's in there, we may be disturbed. So he invites everyone to spend time in meditation, to take a look at the mind, to slow down. Referring to Jesus talking about the time in the desert, Buddha, time in the silence, all of the traditions that have time in nothingness. Time in a place where there is not stimulation, where there is not distraction. Because we so often can soothe ourselves, and in fact soothe ourselves to sleep, by all of the distractions, all of the entertainment, all of the thoughts. And he says it's not until we truly become quiet. And I just think of Richard Rohr and all of the people that he supported in the meditation contemplation practice, and think all the questions he's gotten and everything he's sat with, all the people that are so excited, like, I'm so excited to be at this spiritual retreat and go into the silence. You know, the first time I went into the silence for a long period of time, it started before I thought it was going to start. I thought I was going to have a little extra time to think and to talk and to just... And then all of a sudden it was into the silence, and I felt like someone just stuck a muzzle on my face. Like, it felt suffocating. It actually felt like someone was like holding my breath, and I got a little anxious, like I still have other needs. But it was like, no, you're diving in, and look at what's there. And you watch the thoughts go back and forth. And first you feel consumed by them. That's why a lot of people steer away from meditation. It doesn't work. I can't quiet my mind. Guess what? That's a stage. That's a stage. It's supposed to drive you crazy. It's supposed to feel a little nuts. It's nuts in there. If you don't think it's nuts in there, I don't know if you've tapped in yet. I don't know if you've really listened. You might be living outside of there, because it's nuts in there. It's beautiful. They're beautiful nuts, pecans, pistachios, walnuts, macadamias. But it's wild. And it can be scary. And we can feel alone. And we can feel like we don't belong. Because what we begin to notice is patterns of thinking that we've either inherited, created, or adopted, that have taught us we don't belong, that have taught us that we're not safe, that have taught us that it is not a friendly universe, that have taught us that either God isn't, or God is not love, or God is not right here. And so we hop out. We jump out and we look around. We run around, we walk around, we consume, we produce, we build up and we tear down until we become comfortable in that space, recognizing that that's the portal. In Richard Rohr's book, they call that portal, I love this, the sacrament of the present moment. The sacrament of the present moment. Are we willing to give ourselves time? You know, you have how many years on this planet? We don't know. You have how many moments in this earth suit? You have how many breaths? in this walk of life? Are we willing to give a breath to the present moment? Or will we wake up towards the end when we're taking our last breath and there are no distractions? To say, I guess I'm here with the breath. I guess I have arrived at this present moment. The good news and the glory and the beauty is that we don't have to wait until that last breath for the one breath. It's available in the holy instant, and the holy instant is now. The holy instant is every moment, no matter what you're feeling, no matter what you're looking at. It's the moment you remember that it's about what you're looking through. Richard Rohr says, even with rituals, we distract. Even with spirituality, our ideas of spirituality, sometimes we distract. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it because there was just too much. You can see my book, it was just ridiculous. It's just too much. But it was something about our religious rituals and how they can be very beneficial, right? They can help us slow down and become present. But they can also become rote. They can also be just things that we say or places that we go, and they can become distractions. Because he said, God doesn't need your rituals. Do you believe that? God doesn't need your rituals. They're there for you. They're there for me. They're there for us to practice remembering. And what do we remember when we're in that space? When we begin to see the patterns of the mind and how those patterns play out. You know, the outside, the external, is just the expression of all the patterns in the mind, of the collective. So if we want to stay in our individuation and our separation, we can expect a lot of the same. Because the more that we deny that we are one, we will continue expressing and birthing from our separation. Because we're birthing from the unconsciousness in our minds. That's how we're capable of that. We're capable of it because there are patterns in there. When we awaken to the patterns in there and we move through the portal of the present moment, and we move into that unity consciousness, we move into the truth of God as love, then the outer shifts with the inner. Our vision shifts, what we see shifts. So many of us have had those experiences, right? Where we saw something at one moment and we could judge it in one way, and the circumstances may even be the same, but we're different. Our vision is different. Our sight is different. What we're bringing to the present moment is different. When we move to the inner realms of our own being and into the present moment so deeply that we move through all of the ideas that I don't belong here, I'm not safe, there's separation, criticism, comparison, not okay, fill in the blank, whatever it is for you that you experience either in your inner life or your outer life, it really doesn't matter. Inner or outer. When we can begin to really breathe and ground in the center of our being and observe those thoughts and observe the world around us, we begin to get a gift. Louise Hay taught about that in one of my very favorite affirmations. My sister used to just kind of laugh at me a little bit, but the universe loves me, supports me, and wants me to win. It's funny because that implies win, right? Win could imply someone has to lose, but not if we're all one. The idea that this is a loving, benevolent universe, that we live, move, and have our being in this love is a powerful practice, is a powerful awakening. We're here to experience God as love. Richard Rohr talks about the present moment, saying the present moment has no competition. It is not judged in comparison to any other. It has never happened before and will never happen again. But when I'm in competition, I'm not in love. I can't get to love because I'm looking for a new way to dominate. The way we know this mind is not the truth that is God, is that God does not deal with us like that. God does not deal with us like that. Does the sun stop shining because you showed up poorly in a disagreement? Because you raised your voice, because you got crabby, because you judged? The sun shines on everyone. Those who enter, he says, deeply into the great mystery do not experience a God who compares, differentiates, and judges. They experience an all-embracing receptor, a receiver, who looks at the divine image in us and almost refuses to look at the contrary. Do you know how unsafe it feels not to look at the contrary on this planet? We are so ingrained in the idea of self-protection and self-preservation, of this individual identity, that it almost feels like we're being irresponsible with ourselves and our world when we show up so purely or so fully with love, as if, well, love can't take care of that. How is it going to heal if I show up with love? How am I going to fix myself if I show up with love? How could compassion possibly heal this? Divine paradox. Jesus, he says, and the great spiritual teachers primarily emphasized transformation of consciousness and soul. Our pattern is to distract from that. When we can move through the distractions, we can find spaciousness. We can find a neutral place, a place that's often described in spiritual teachings as that nothingness, as the desert, as the silence. He says, being nothing has a glorious tradition. When we are nothing, we are in a fine position to receive everything from God. If we look at all the great religious traditions, we see they use those words. The Franciscan would use the word poverty, the Carmelite, nada, nothingness. The Buddhists speak of emptiness. Jesus preferred to talk in images, so he spoke of the desert. The desert was where we voluntarily understimulated. The place where we voluntarily understimulated. Do you crave that? I have craved that all my life. That's where we stop living out of other people's responses to us. We can say then, I am not who you think I am, nor am I whom you need me to be. I'm not even who I need myself to be. I must be nothing in order to be open to all of reality and new reality. The Zen master calls this state the face we had before we were born. Paul would call it who you are in Christ, hidden in God. Richard Rohr says, you are in union. There is nothing to prove, nothing to attain. Everything is already there. It is simply a matter of recognizing and honoring and trusting. All spiritual disciplines exist to help you trust this personal experience of yourself, which is not surprisingly also an experience of God. People are usually amazed that the two experiences can coincide. When we know God, we seem to know and accept our own humanity. When we meet ourselves at a profound level of recognition, we also meet God. We don't have any real access to who we are except through God. And we don't have any real access to God except through forgiving and rejoicing in our own humanity. See God now. See God now in the sacrament of the present moment. Namaste. Let's take a moment to breathe together in the silence. To just inhale and exhale. We'll use the prayer, the words, the sacred scripture that has been said so many times in the Heart of Hearts, that's shared by Richard Rohr, that has been spoken in this Silent Unity chapel, this atrium, for years and years. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. Be still. Be. By the power of this practice, may we have freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering. May we know God as love and ourselves as emanations of this love. May we know that we are born blessed and here to be the light of God. And so it is.